Hey guys, welcome to the next Smoke and Flame quick tip. Now this one's going to be on a technique which has been around for a while, but I thought I'd share in case you didn't know about it. It's the degrain, regrain based off the foreground, where you take the grain away and then put it back on. So I figure I'll show you. So I'm just going to chuck these two background and foreground layers on top of each other and then do effects, selection as flow graph, and create batch effects. So we've got our background and then our foreground, which you guys have seen from previous tutorials. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just press D and pull out the Degrain and Shift Alt to kiss him in. And I'm going to press F1, actually denoise, apologies. So I'm just going to grab the denoise and put that guy in. And I'm just going to press Add, and I'm just going to make this box a little bit smaller. I'm just going to do samples on kind of mid-level, and I'll add another one. I'll go to green, and again I'll make this a bit smaller, and I'll add one more, and I'm just going to put this over the highlights and again make it a little bit smaller, and I click Analyze, and you'll see what it's done. If I go F1, F4, it's doing its best to take away the grain. And sometimes you use this technique for keen, even because sometimes, especially with fine hair details, this can help to just kind of, you get a lot smoother edge around hair and stuff like that. But again, then the problem is you have to put the grain back in, and this technique works good because you're putting back what was there to start with. Now, some caveats is, again, if the background isn't evenly lit and if there's, tracking markers, you want to clean them up properly because you're going to be putting back those patterns that will exist, and I'll show you in a second. So I'm just going to swipe left, and I'm going to set this up. So first thing I'm going to do is just grab a comp node and just Shift Alt and then kiss the denoise as the foreground. And then for input 2, I'll do the source, and I'm going to double click and press F4, and I'm going to choose subtract. Now by default it doesn't look like it's doing much, but if we switch it to linear, you see there's our grain, and I'll just press Shift A to pull up the exposure, and that's again the grain that's been subtracted from the plate based off the denoise we just did. So I'm just going to reset and go back to video. Now say this comp was already done. We already did our key on this guy and we wanted to kiss the grain back on. The way to put it back on is, again, we'll just go C, and I'll pull out a comp, and we'll do foreground, which will be the output of the subtraction, and then the background will be the denoise. So if I press F4 and switch it to add, you see this is what we want. But things to note with this technique to pay attention to. So if I just go back here and just back click on each of these, so context 1, context 2, if I do 1 then 2, you see we're getting a pretty extreme mismatch, some weird stuff, especially in, like, I guess the midtones to darks are not behaving the same as the source, which is context 2. So again, 1, 2. So the way to fix this is quite simple, is because we're working in 8-bit right now. So if I just do color and then just again select him and do Shift Alt to double click. So again, we've just promoted it to 16 float now. And now if I do the same thing and do 1 then 2, you see we're getting exactly the same grain that's getting put back on with 0 discrepancies between the two. Now another caveat with this technique is, if you do happen to put this back on top, the original piping of this denoise is actually very dependent on the foreground being the denoise to the first subtract. So if I do swap the inputs and then do 1, 2, you see we're getting a weird discrepancy. So for whatever reason, the hierarchy actually is pretty important. So if I just turn that off and then just do 1, 2, you see we're back to a nice parity. So again, sometimes you want to do that from a key perspective to get rid of, but then sometimes you don't want to put all that noise back in. So the beauty of this technique is you can just dial in the amount, whichever, totally subjective to whatever's pleasing to you. So I'll just control click that out again to get it to back to normal. So again, 1, 2, we're back to where we were. And again, an example of this, if I just copy this denoise, I'll just duplicate that, put it on this guy. You see that's taken the noise out. Is if you are, and again it relies on a cleaner solid green, if you are doing this technique, And we did have a key, so if we just do a quick and dirty master key on this guy, and I'll just select in there, that's good enough for this example. And again, I'll just promote this guy to 16 float as well. And I'll just do a quick comp, so foreground, matte, and back. And I'll just change this to front CC. And if we look at this, again, there's our horrible comp. Again, we would add other things if this was a real comp, but for this example, putting the grain back on these guys would be, again, I'll put it up to, it should actually be on the denoise. So now they're both denoise sources. And then what we could do again is use this guy. So we would go, the background is actually this new comp. And if we look at the result now, and we do 1, 2, we see we're kissing in, and if I turn this down, we're kissing in the grain overall based off the original green plate. So not always a perfect technique, but for some circumstances, it can be really handy and get you across the line quicker than using and introducing fake grain with the regrain. Well, that's it for this quick tip, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more.